think they're ready to surrender?
आईएनए की बागी फौजियों पर अंग्रेज देशद्रोह का मुकदमा चलाएंगे।
उन तीनों के बचने के चांसेस कम हैं।
ये कोई आम केस नहीं, कोर्ट मार्शल है। बोला भाई, एक केस आप कांग्रेस के लिए नहीं, सुभाष बोस के लिए लड़ी।
Lieutenant Gobak Singh Dillon, Captain Shah Nawaz Khan, Captain P.K. Sehgal. Section 41, waging war against the king. You are charged with murder. Do you plead guilty to the charges read out?
ईमानदारी से आजादी के लिए लड़ने वाली अगर कोई फौज है तो उसका नाम है आजाद हिंद फौज।
The safety, honor and welfare of your country comes first, always.
British Indian Army hand you over to the Japanese Imperial Army.
हिंदुस्तान और अंग्रेजों के बीच एक धागा था, वो टूट गया।
इस बार कुछ ऊपर नीचे हुआ तो देश में बवाल मच जाए। अब जनता किसी अंग्रेज को नहीं छोड़ेगी।
रात दिन अपने सीने विच वजदी आजादी दे राग नू बंद कर ला।
अंग्रेजी अफसरों ने साडी हिफाजत नहीं की, तो वो हमारी वफादारी के हकदार किस तरह हो सकते हैं?
आज हिंदुस्तानी फौज के पास अपना असली मकसद है, हिंदुस्तान की आजादी।
तुम मुझे खून दो, मैं तुम्हें आजादी दूंगा।
ये मुकदमा पूरी इंडियन नेशनल आर्मी का है।
क्योंकि हमने वो दिन देखा है जब हमें ऐसा लगा था कि हमने हिंदुस्तान को वाकई आजाद कर दिया।
देश की आजादी की लड़ाई कोर्ट में लड़ी जा रही है और इस वक्त पूरा देश एक साथ तैनात है।
This trial and its judgment shall be remembered throughout history.
First, I would like to thank Dr. Shakti Sinha for inviting me here and giving this opportunity to interact with all of you. The subject, should reach to the common people because there is a lot of misunderstanding about, why we should study, ancient cultures, ancient heritage. There are different terms used for the Harappan culture. And when it was discovered in 1920s, it was considered to be the major breakthrough or the discovery of the archaeological discovery of the century because we had different understanding about the history of the Indian subcontinent or South Asia. Now, one general misunderstanding that all the Harappan sites that we have discovered, they are all city sites. That is not true. In fact, we have discovered, I will show you, of course, we have discovered nearly 2,000 settlements so far. Settlement of the Harappan period. And out of 2,000, there are only 5 places which could be identified as Harappan cities, not all. And there could be maybe around 2 dozen sites which can come under the category of Harappan towns. Whereas all the other Harappan sites, they fall in different categories. There are some maybe small villages, big villages. There are manufacturing centers, there are Harappan ports, and even some temporary settlements, which were established for the exploitation of the localized source of raw materials. So these are the different categories. And always I say that we have biased understanding about the Harappan culture. The early or the formative stage is called the early Harappan, and the date of the early Harappan is now going back to 5,000 or even 5,500 BC. So there's a constant growth happening from the beginning, from 5,000 or 5,500 BC. And that growth has ultimately culminated into the formation of the urban phase around 2600 BC. And that particular phase, from 2600 BC to 2000 BC or 1900 BC, That particular phase is called the Harappan civilization, not the entire phase. We use two terms, Harappan culture and the Harappan civilization. The urbanized phase is called the Harappan civilization, and that is for 500 to 600 years. And then again, the decline starts, so the decline phase is called the late Harappan. So these are the different stages of the Harappan culture. And the work that we have carried out clearly demonstrate that there is a gradual growth. It took almost for them to come to the status of urbanization almost 3,000 years, from 5,500 BC to 2,500 or 2,600 BC. So this is a very long period. And there are a couple of sites in the Indian subcontinent. One, of course, is the site of Mehergarh, where we have quite good evidence about the growth. And the second now region, in fact, is the Saraswati region where we are working. And there are a few sites, like Birana is one of them, then Farmana, where I excavated, and now Rakhikadi, where we are understanding the growth of the Harappan civilization. Now this started, in fact, if you see the chronology of the Indian culture. Now our earliest Stone Age period is going back to almost 2 million years, that is 20 lakh years. And then since then, in fact, we can see the development happening, and we cannot really disconnect the Stone Age period from the proto-historic period, and we cannot really disconnect the pre-Harappan phase from the Harappan phase, because there is a constant growth. Then I come to the core region. In fact, I consider the Saraswati region or the Ghaggar-Hakra region as the core region of the Harappan civilization, because nearly 2/3 of the Harappan sites are located in the Saraswati basin. So this was a very important region for the Harappan culture, Harappan civilization. And there, in fact, now at the site of Birana, which was excavated by the Archaeological Survey of India, there we can see a gradual growth, in fact, in the architectural evidence. So they started, in fact, in this particular format, in the form of pit dwellings. They dug pits, underground pits, and the pits form a complex. In fact, 3 or 4 pits form one complex, and each pit was used for different purpose. Maybe 1 or 2 pits were used for dwelling purpose, 1 for storage, 1 for cooking, like that. So this was the type of evidence that we get in the early stage. So this is the beginning of the Harappan culture, in fact. Now we always compare the Harappans with the Mesopotamians and the Egyptians. But the basic difference, in fact, now in terms of size, of course, the Mesopotamians and Egyptians were very small, confined to a country, small country, maybe part of the country. But this is the Harappan civilization was spread. In fact, this was truly international civilization, because right from the Russian border down south up to Maharashtra, and from the Makran coast up to the western part of UP, this was the large area which was occupied by the Harappan civilization. And the area that was occupied by the Harappan civilization was something like 2.5 million square kilometer, which is like double the size of Pakistan. So such a large area, and they created, in fact, what I say, in fact, I always believe that the concept of empire or the concept of nation, now that was started by the Harappans, because over such a large area, almost on 2.5 million square kilometer area, they created one nation, in fact, one indigenous culture or the one homogeneous culture. And this is a maybe rare example in the world where this type of empire or the nation was created by peaceful means. Otherwise, we know the history, in fact, most of the empires are conquered, they are made by forceful means. But this is a unique example in the world from which we really need to learn a lot. Technically, Harappans were very much advanced, and perhaps they were much more capable than the Mesopotamians and the Egyptians. And they could easily have constructed those type of public buildings or the life-size images. But the thinking of the Harappan was different. I'm talking about the philosophy of the Harappans, which is more practical. They generated huge amount of wealth from the West, because they had very beneficial trade with the Mesopotamians and Egyptians. And they generated huge wealth, in fact. And that wealth was used by the Harappans for creating such a beautiful, well-planned cities. And those cities, you'll see that they were replete with basic amenities, civic amenities, which you don't really see anywhere in the world. Now, usually the Harappan cities are divided into two parts, particularly the evidence from the site of Harappa and Mohenjo-daro, and also from Kalibangan. Now, they have demonstrated that usually the cities were divided into two parts. In this particular plan, you can see, and usually the citadel part is considered to be the place for the elite class or people of the higher ranking. We are puzzled in fact why the Harappans had to build such a thick wall. They have built 18-meter thick wall, 18-meter thick on the top and 25-meter thick at the base. So such a thick wall, because the Harappans had no enemies. The contemporary people were mostly the hunter-gatherers, the Mesolithic people in pattern around them, or the maybe early farming communities like the rural communities, what we call as the Chalkuti. So they had they did not create or pose any threat to the Harappans. But we really wonder in fact. Sometimes it became maybe plan of the city, that fortification plan, part became a plan of the city sometimes. And at some places, maybe it was required. For example, the fortification is required in fact at the site of Mohenjo-daro, because Mohenjo-daro is located on the bank of the Indus River, and the river gets frequently flooded, and so it creates danger to the settlement. So they have fortified the city in fact from the from these floods. Whereas at Harappa we really don't see why they have to build such a fortification wall. So maybe it was a plan of the planning maybe. But maybe at Dholavira it is required, because Dholavira is located on the ancient trade route, a very important trade route between Sindh and Saurashtra, because Saurashtra had most of the natural resources, and Harappan exploited these natural resources for various reasons, for various purposes. So they had to use this particular trade route, and they built a number of series of settlements in fact on the route. And Dholavira is the biggest city on the route, and they had Surkotara, another fortified town, Junikoran, another fortified town. So there are maybe half a dozen like that, and each one is fortified. And possibly the merchants were maybe traveling on this route frequently, so they can take shelters in fact at such a fortified settlements, and therefore maybe there's these fortifications were created. So this is one important part of the Harappan city. So we have at least there is a main the fortification has 4 gates on 4 sides, and at the site of Dholavira in fact it has been proved almost that these cities had proper fortification and proper gates. And also this this is the fortification of the lower town. So lower town also had equally strong fortification. And another important feature of the Harappan fortification is the bastions. On the corners in fact we can see the bastions. So this is the important feature of the Harappan fortification. And the entry in fact, this is one of the entries to the to the inner part, to the Acropolis at the site of Dholavira. And the entry was not really straight in fact. One has to take maybe flight of steps and turn maybe left and right and then enter. And on both sides in fact of the entrance we can see number of rooms, and the excavator has identified them as the maybe rooms for the security guard. So the entry in fact to the maybe citadel part or the Acropolis was properly guarded. In fact, it was properly it was highly fortified and secured. So this is the important feature of the Harappan maybe fortification. The other important feature which was not known till the excavations at the site of Dholavira is the presence of this polished stone pillars and polished stone pillar bases. This the fragments of these pillars were lying on the surface, and again everybody thought that these pillars belong to the maybe the medieval period, maybe structures of medieval period, because in India we always thought that the concept of maybe polished stone concept comes from Iran, maybe around 3rd to 4th century BC, not before that. But this is the earliest evidence of that. Harappans have used that, and there are a lot of pillars in fact which are in situ. In fact, they are in the walls. So there is no doubt about the antiquity of these polished stone pillars and bases. In fact, these are some of the different shapes of the polished stone pillars found. So this is a very important feature of the Harappan fortification wall. And we always thought that Harappans have done maybe trade in the luxury goods, maybe in small goods, but that is not true. In fact, a lot of the trade was also in the building material. The stone from Dholavira, in fact, was supplied to Mohenjo-daro, which is around 600 kilometers, and further 500 kilometers to Harappa. And one American scholar, Randall Law, in fact, has studied the stone found at all the sites. And he has come to the conclusion that the quarry of the stone was, in fact, near Dholavira. He has done scientific study on the stone. So there was a big trade, in fact, in the building material also. So this is an important feature which was not known. And here you can see, in fact, the citadel part of the the city at the site of Mohenjo-daro. And they have excavated maybe 90% of the citadel part at Mohenjo-daro. So we are very clear about what type of remains are found, in fact, in the citadel part. There are huge structures on in the citadel part, and also there are some public buildings like the public bath, for example, and the public granary, etc. They are located, in fact, in the citadel part. And you can see the location of the public bath. I call them as the earliest evidence of swimming pool anywhere in the world, because the swimming pool concept has really emerged from this, which always believe that this particular concept has come from the West. But this is the earliest evidence of that. And why I call this as a swimming pool, because there are rooms on all sides of this particular structure. Maybe you can see in the next picture. This is the evidence of that. And what you are seeing, in fact, here, in fact, these are the structures which are all around this particular water tank, and maybe they are meant for changing clothes there. But so this is a very important feature. And you can also see the flight of steps. Maybe they were provided for the maintenance purpose. And there's a well, in fact. I visited the site a couple of months ago, and I studied that well, which is very close to this particular structure. So the water was drawn from that and periodically changed, in fact, from this particular structure. So they are maintained properly. So in a real sense, this is the evidence of the earliest swimming pool anywhere in the world. And of course, there are some structures. In this particular structure, in this particular picture, you can see these are blocks of the platforms you can see here. Now, this particular structure has been identified as the Greenery, public Greenery, by the site of that. And there are some big structures here. And the excavators believe that these particular structures were owned by, maybe the elite class or the administrators of the city. So we know now what is the purpose of the citadel part. And this is the structure which has been identified as the public granary at the site of Harappa, which is also located in the citadel part. So this is the reconstruction of that particular granary found at the site of Harappa. And then, of course, you see there are perfectly north-south and east-west running street. There are main streets. So this is one of the main streets located in the citadel part of Mohenjo-daro. And similar, arrangement is also seen, in fact, in the lower town of most of the cities. And, both, in fact, in the lower town and the citadel, the structures are really, are crowded, really. And the foundation of the most of the structures are, is made of the stone or burnt bricks. And then, of course, except Harappa and Mohenjo-daro, at other places, the walls are made of stone or the mud bricks. And also you can see now there are a lot of maybe small streets, lanes, and by-lanes. And this is one of the, maybe lanes at the site of Mohenjo-daro. And you can see that, that none of the structures open, in fact, toward the street. The opening is always, on the opposite side of the street. Now, this is important, in fact, from the hygienic point of view. This is important, and they are really maintained this properly. So this is the, maybe the glimpse of the lower part of the city at the site of Mohenjo-daro. It's well planned, in fact. And they have, these roads are running, perfectly north, south, east, west direction. There are parallel, small roads, lanes, and by-lanes. And this is one of the north, south, and east, west running meet impact. The square impact at the site of Dholavira. This is the part of the lower city at the site of Dholavira. Now the mega cities, like or the cosmopolitan cities, they had more or less same uniform pattern. But when it comes to the towns or small places, the planning varies in fact from town to town or from settlement to settlement, depending upon the function of the settlement. For example, this is the this is the plan, or this is the evidence of what is known as the water tank at the site of Lothal. Now this has been identified by Professor S.R. Rao as the dockyard, and a lot of European and American scholars have opposed. In fact, they say that this is a simple sweet water tank. But we should keep in mind that there was no need of sweet water tank because the river is very close to the settlement. The evidence of water management, water harvesting at the site is unique. This particular city was established by the Harappans in the desert part. The climate during the Harappan time was not much different, maybe slightly higher rainfall. But during the Harappan times, it was a desert. But they had to establish, this particular city. So what they did in fact to overcome the difficulties, water difficulties, there are two streams in fact, Manhar and Mansar, by the site of this particular settlement. And the Harappans have dam, in fact, there are a series of dams in fact on both. The present village is quite away from the ancient village, so there's no modern interference at the site at all. So the remains that you see in fact on the site, on particularly in the river, the river, the evidence of the this dam is very much Harappan. So they created series of dams, and in the rainy in the desert part, there is occasional rainfall, and whenever there is rainfall, in fact, there is a flash flood in the rivers. So the flash floods must occur like that. Now this is actual picture in fact which I took during the in the rainy season. So this type of flash floods come. So Harappans must have erected this type of maybe barriers, and they diverted the water. They stored the water, and they made sure that the water table, water level is becomes high in that part, and also part of the water was diverted inside the settlement. So by doing this, in fact, they made sure that there is always water available in fact in the city. Today between Dholavira and Rapar is the nearest town, which is 110 kilometers. There are hardly 4 or 5 villages, and the settlement is not happening because there's always dearth of water. But if we can learn something from the Harappans, if you can adopt this particular method, now you don't really require huge funding for this. You don't need really collaboration with Israel for this particular purpose. This is the indigenous technique which was developed by the Harappans. Very simple. You have to mobilize the community and get these things done. I'm sure that the entire desert part can be converted into green land. So this is something the Indians need to learn. Particularly the town planners, in fact, they really need to incorporate some of the features which were introduced by our ancestors. This is the plan of Lothal. In fact, there's a tank, and then of course inside you have maybe some maybe industrial area. There's a there's a warehouse by the side of that. There's Acropolis, a small but all the features of the Harappan cities are present here. I showed you already that one of the inlets in fact of that particular structure, and this is the reconstruction done by Professor S.R. Rao, how the city must have looked like or must have functioned during the Harappan times. Yes, it shows that this river in fact it gets when there is a high tidal effect, in fact the water comes up to here and that can come here. So they can bring the water inside, they can bring the ship inside, and they can empty that, and if they want to repair the ship, they can do that. Or they could also use this, they could have used this particular structure for the construction of the ship also. So this is a very important evidence. Also at most of the Harappan cities, we find, two important features always present. One is the storage facility, because, the concept of city or the definition of city is that most of the people, in fact, living in the city, they do not practice basic subsistence activity. They're not the farmers. And they get, in fact, they get the supply from the settlements which are located, around them, what we call as the satellite settlements. And there is always symbiotic relation between the, settlements or the small sites and the city. And that particular concept even, survives even today. Delhi gets, supply from the, from the villages located around. There may be supply of, vegetable, food grains, etc. And when they are, you are getting food grains, in fact, they need to be stored, in fact, for, which can last for the, entire year. So they created this type of, storage facility at most of the cities. And also at major Harappan, cities, there's also, quite elaborate, facility for the manufacturing purpose also. At Dholavira, there is a beet factory. Also at the site of Lothal, in fact, there's a beet factory. The beets were manufactured there on large scale, supplied to other settlements. Similarly, at some sites, we find the evidence of the pottery making. At some sites, we find the evidence of the maybe metallurgy or the metal tool making, etc. So this type of facilities is found, in fact, at most of the Harappan cities. Most of the Harappan legacy has even survived today. I'm excavating at the site of Rakigadi, and when I move around, in fact, in the village, I get the feel that I'm moving in the Harappan village. There is so much similarity. The present house plan, in Punjab and Haryana, is exactly the model of the Harappan plan. It is open in the middle, and there are rooms on all sides. This is the most scientific, plan that was developed by the Harappans, and it has survived. And it is required, in fact, in this particular part because it provides enough ventilation and enough light by this particular plan. So people are following that particular method. Then I mentioned that the Harappan, this traditional knowledge system or the Indian knowledge system was created by the Harappans, and it has survived. Even though the Harappans have declined, maybe around 1500 BC, the people have moved, in fact, in the periphery part. They are not really died out. They are not really completely vanished. But they moved into the periphery region, got mixed up with the local population, and they have kept alive the Harappan tradition. That is how the Harappan tradition or legacy has survived. And maybe the knowledge system that which was created by the Harappans, it has been kept alive because in India we have very strong oral tradition. In fact, I was excavating in Rajasthan, and we used to get one, the local bhat, from the village. And he used to recite the history of, genealogical history for 800 to 900 years. And he was illiterate, but, he used to do that. So we have that particular very strong tradition, and that is how the knowledge has been, kept, alive from generation to generation. And maybe, we had very early, maybe we had the earliest universities in fact in the world, Nalanda and the Takshila universities, and there in fact we used to teach the typical knowledge system. A lot of people from other countries used to come to learn about this very important knowledge system, about which we really do not care. And as I mentioned that we should, in fact, when the planners, the city planners, in fact, they are thinking about planning a city, they need to study the past plan, in fact, and they need to see what features can be incorporated into the modern city planning, which is important. The only thing that we have not learned from the Harappans is the drainage system. The modern drainage is spread, in fact, in the street, whereas this was not the case during the Harappan time. The Harappan streets were very clean. So this is one method that we need to really learn from them. And the other thing that we should learn from the Harappans, intentionally the Harappans have built the thick mud walls or mudbrick walls in the Saraswati region, because this region is very extremely, climate-wise, it is highly extreme. The winter is extreme and the summer is extreme. But if you build thick walls of mud or mud bricks, the structures inside remain quite congenial, in fact, both in winter and summer. Unfortunately, the people have again switched over from this particular traditional method to the concrete method, and most of the structures they are really not good for the living purpose. So this is something we need to learn from our ancient past, and this is how I say that we study the ancient cultures. We try to generate the knowledge system, and ultimately some of the knowledge system needs to be used and put to use, and it is going to be really beneficial for the entire human community. Thank you very much.